This is 3.3 Stress, Anxiety and Arousal. There are many different factors affecting Nick, including stress and anxiety. Stress is your body's response to a certain situation that requires adjustment to the body's physical or emotional state. Stress can be defined as a pattern of negative physiological states and psychological responses occurring in situations where people perceive threats to their well-being, which may be unable to meet, from Lazarus and Folkman in 1984. This suggests that if someone perceives that a certain situation threatens their well-being, then they will have negative physiological states and responses. Nick may be showing stress as he constantly worries about his grades, showing negative psychological responses, and he is worried that he may be unable to meet the demands of his schoolwork. Lazarus then stated later in 1991 that stress is generally discussed in relation to an imbalance between the demands of the situation encountered by an individual and the perceived ability to cope or adjust to these demands. This is suggesting that stress is caused by the individual's perceived ability to cope with the demands of a situation. Nick may also be feeling stress as he has been struggling to play well all season, and when he makes an error, his whole performance falls apart. This would be stressful for Nick, as when he makes a mistake, he believes he cannot cope with the match and therefore becomes stressed, leading to a bad performance. Stress can bring both positive and negative factors depending on the level of stress the individual is feeling. McEwen in 2002 stated that stress can have beneficial effects in terms of mobilization of body resources to meet demands, but also detrimental effects when perceived demands exceed the individual's resources. This is saying that a good amount of stress can bring physical advantages to the individual in sport, such as an increased heart rate or breathing rate. However, if the level of stress becomes too high, it can have a very negative effect on the player's performance. This graph shows us performance against the level of stress. We can see that if a player is too calm or too stressed, known as distress, then they are more likely to have a lower performance. However, if the level of stress is at a certain level, known as eustress, then the performance will be at its best. The curve of this graph is gradual, as if the player is slightly stressed but not enough to be at eustress, then they will perform better than if they were not stressed at all. Eu means well or good in Greek, suggesting that eustress means healthy or good stress. Eustress is a positive reaction to stress leading to optimal arousal, helping to increase concentration, challenge, and satisfaction. It also helps as motivation and satisfaction for coping to the stress. However, distress is extreme nervousness, apprehension, or anxiety, which could result to a perceived inability to meet the demands of the situation. It is likely that Nick is showing distress because the stress from his coach telling him how he should be playing for the college and his schoolwork is leading to a decrease in his performance, because it is likely that he is feeling a large amount of anxiety and worry, leading to him no longer believing he could win the matches or play well. When someone becomes stressed, their cognitive, somatic, and behavioural factors all change. Cognitive factors that change as a symptom of stress include a reduced concentration, unable to make decisions, making mistakes, loss of esteem, and worry. We can tell that Nick is showing signs of stress as he makes more mistakes than he would that they worked on in practice, which makes his match fall apart, decreasing his self-esteem before, during and after matches. Behavioural factors that change include poor personal presentation, moodiness, lethargy, accidents and clumsiness. Lastly, somatic factors that change due to stress include an increased heart rate, increased adrenaline, increased muscle tension, a dry mouth, and increased heat production. Some of these factors can come to be an advantage to the player, like increased heart rate and breathing rate. However, if the player becomes too stressed, it can also trigger disadvantages such as dry mouth or an increased heat production, as they may ultimately lead to a decrease in performance. Once the player has left this stressful situation or no longer has a stressor, the somatic factor will return back to normal levels through homeostasis. A stressor is a situation that causes a stressful response. There are many different factors that may affect how stressful someone feels. Some categories include someone's life, someone's job, lifestyle factors, internal and external factors, and sporting achievements. In sports, there are many factors that may become stressful for the player. For example, Nick may have become distressed because he felt as though his coach had put pressure on him to win, as he said how well Nick should have been playing. It is also likely that Nick may have perceived that he was unable to beat the opposition, triggering him to become stressed. Nick's schoolwork is also likely to be causing him some stress. While he is playing the matches, his mind may wander from the game to the work that he needs to complete, making him anxious or stressed, as he prioritises his schoolwork over badminton. As he may feel as though he isn't spending enough time on schoolwork, Nick may be staying up late at nights to do work, which could lead to an increased fatigue, leading to poor performance, which then makes him more stressed. Lastly, Nick's coach is putting lots of pressure on him to do well, which could also increase Nick's perceived importance of the match, causing Nick to become even more stressed. In 1970, McGrath produced what is known as the stress process. This process is split into 4 stages and can be perceived from a positive or a negative point of view. Stage 1 is the stressor, so the situation that increase the person's stress levels. Stage 2 is how stressful the person perceives the situation as being, and whether they see the stressor positively as a challenge or negatively as a threat. Stage 3 is the way they apply that feeling to their sporting performance, physiologically or psychologically. This may cause the athlete to perform eustress if they perceive the situation as being a challenge, as they're more motivated, or distress as they see the situation as a threat. From there, stage 4 is the outcome, so whether they play better or worse. Nick is playing his games. When Nick is playing his games, the demand is being able to perform the tactic that he has worked on with his coach. It appears that he is seeing it as negative, as he may feel threatened by the opponent. This then causes distress and leads to his performance falling apart. The stress process is good at explaining the different ways people perceive stress and the ways of coping with it and what it can lead to. However, it suggests that if someone perceives something negatively, it will always end up with a bad performance or a reduced performance. However, it does not account for those who don't feel stressed or have a low level of stress. It is likely that Sarah is suffering from distress as she performs negatively at crunch games. She may be feeling stressed due to added pressure from her teammate Rachel, who isn't very supportive of her in the crunch games that have many spectators watching. There may also be added pressure due to the spectators watching. This may explain why Sarah's scoring average decreases on these crunch games, as she perceives the spectators as a threat, causing her distress, and then Rachel's unsupportive attitude may add more stress, resulting in an even poorer performance. However, it is likely that Rachel is suffering from eustress, as she seems to thrive off of the atmosphere. She also sees this atmosphere and the game as a challenge, and therefore she sees it not negatively, resulting in an increased energy and motivation, causing her to perform better in matches, which may explain why she receives Player of the Game many times. Another explanation for Sarah's negative performance may be due to anxiety. Anxiety, according to Buckwork and Dishman in 2002, is a negative state of worry, apprehension, or tension that often occurs in the absence of real or obvious danger. Typically, the tension felt by anxious individuals is accompanied by a heightened state of physiological arousal. This suggests that when there is no danger, someone still feels the worry and tension they would if they were in danger. Anxiety is a negative emotional state accompanied by feelings of worry and doubt caused by situations which the person perceives as threatening, as they doubt their ability to cope. Anxiety is different to stress in the way that stress is a reaction to a threat in a certain situation, whereas anxiety is a negative reaction to something that may or may not happen in the future, often resulting in over-arousal. Anxiety can be split into 5 different types of anxiety. First is state anxiety, which is when the feelings change from situation to situation and is how they're feeling in the moment. It is a temporary state of emotional response to a situation where the individual feels threatened. This can be either cognitive or somatic. Cognitive anxiety is how we think towards the situation, and it is associated with negative evaluations of performance. McNally in 2002 stated that it is the negative explanations and concerns about one's ability to perform and the possible consequences of failure. This is suggesting that the individual doubts their ability and worries about what may happen if they fail. Cognitive anxiety is your emotional feelings such as negative thoughts or worry, and is generally caused by stress. If they are struggling from somatic anxiety, this means that it is their physiological component of anxiety. This is mainly associated with heart rate, breathing rate, blood pressure, and is triggered by cognitive anxiety. Somatic anxiety can also be somatic state anxiety, which is related to how you perceive physiological changes that happen in certain situations. These changes may also include an increased muscle tension, a queasy stomach, so butterflies, increased heart rate, and clammy hands.